This is Tales from the Cube, a podcast about call centers, what it's like to work in them, the good, the bad, the ugly, the funny and not so funny side of what it's like working in a call center. 23022 is the episode number. I'm Cliff, and I'm a call center rep here in Hamilton, Ontario. I work as a Tier 2 advisor handling escalations and direct calls. Some of those calls are real doozies. In the business, we call these customers tinfoil hats. They try our patience, and the type of customer is the one of the more difficult ones to handle for several reasons. The tinfoil hatter is definitely a tricky customer to deal with. That is partly due to the number of different characteristics here that I will outline in this particular episode. The first and most noticeable is the clear, or in some cases not so clear, evidence of mental health issues. Most of the people who are considered to be tinfoil hats are seriously mentally ill. However, there are times when a customer calls who appears to be a tinfoil hat, but is not. These customers are actively experiencing real issues with account breaches and device compromise. As much as we want to say devices and accounts are unbreachable, the reality is that they are not. Man-in-the-middle attacks and other methods are out there to garner access to accounts and devices. These exist. They are real. Police and other agencies also do target citizens and track them for obvious reasons. In the cases where friends, family, and spouses are involved in the mix, there can be and are instances of attempted hacking. So this in part is a real thing. So not everyone who is calling us is a tinfoil hat. May sound like it, but it's not necessarily the case. Where it gets really nutty is when the person who is contacting us has a mental health issue. Now, I don't want to make light of this, but we are not really trained to handle mental illness crisis calls, and at best we are poorly trained in call centers to deal with this. And on the honesty scale here, 10 out of 10, it differs from what we are there to do. We're not there taking calls to field mental health issues. There are centers set up for this particular type of call, and call centers dealing with consumer goods and services are not. My campaign is not designed to handle such calls, and it never was intended to be that. So we're not really there to do this kind of stuff. Okay, we're there to help with technical support issues or sales issues or other customer service related issues, not mental health issues. Another factor contributing to the tinfoil hat nuisance is that many companies need to do more in the space and be more active towards these customers and staff handling the calls. By active, they need to set up systems and policies to handle such calls. The sad part is that many companies are more or less apathetic to the callers and the staff taking the calls and do little to nothing to resolve or reduce these types of calls. One has to ask is, what is the best way to handle these calls outside of going to school and to become a psychiatrist or other mental health specialist? The answer is similar to how we handle an opportunity customer, the irate or angry caller. So we want to do these with a little bit of a twist here, if you will. First and foremost, we want to listen. Remember, some of these calls are real. The person is not a tinfoil hat. However, if they are a tinfoil hatter, listen without little or no interruption for at least 5 minutes. Log as much information as you can in notes and follow step number 2. Respond with acknowledgement of the issue. Now, this may be challenging because the tinfoil hat will give you a lot of info about things in what I'd like to call the verbal diarrhea. Everything, including the kitchen sink, is going to be, definitely tossed out to you. So the key is listening and hearing what is at the core of the issue. In most cases, it's about the account and device security. That's what they're really calling to deal with. Stay on message in this and in scope. While hard to do and to deal with, the tinfoiler will want to run amok here. You must do everything possible to stay on the topic and within the scope of your support. If the caller can't, or in most cases won't do what you want, end the interaction. End it. Stop it. Put a lid on it real quick. Be polite but firm. Make it clear that the topic, let's say for example, it's about black helicopters overhead, watching them. Make it clear that this is not in your scope, but handling security issues with the device or the account is. You might want to start this way. I understand your concern about the helicopters overhead. Let's focus on managing your concern about the account or device. This way we can make it more challenging for them to watch. Or, okay, we are not equipped to stop them from watching you or monitoring you, but we can help make it more challenging to do that. If they continue to come back to the helicopters, you will want to let them know that you can help protect the account and device, but the helicopters, for this example, are best handled by the agency flying them overhead. If at this point they still zero in on the mythical, magical helicopters in the sky, the choppers flying around overhead, then basically at this point you're going to want to do something about that. And that is to explain that this is not in your scope of support to handle, offer case numbers and other case tracking information, and end it there and then. Put a stop to it. Just like, shut it down. You're not going to get anywhere with these guys. You're going to be on the phone for a good hour or 2 hours, and it's just really a headache to have to deal with. I know I've dealt with them. I still do deal with them. And that, this is a lesson even to myself, because the bottom line is I get rooked into this myself. And I end up in a call like for 20 or 30 minutes when really it's just a 5 or 10 minute call and you need to get out of there. Remember, you are in a role to help with account sales, support, order entry, and other account management. You're not there to field mental health calls. Let your manager know about the uptick in such calls and make it clear that you are not comfortable with this, and you know very well that this is not your job to do. Managers may and will definitely state that this is part of the job. No. This is not part of your job to handle people who are in crisis. Now, I will say with a bit of a caveat here, it is part of your role that you're going to get nuisance calls. It's part of your role that you're going to get a tinfoiler hat. And you want to basically deal with them and help them out as best you can within a small period of time. But it's not your focus. It is not your job to do this. This is not what you're paid to sit in that chair to do. Your mental health and safety are also essential. You must be mentally and somewhat physically fit to do this job. Secondly, unless you are a trained mental health specialist, this is not a good idea. This is not a job you do. This is not a thing you should be delving into. You could, and in some cases, some agents have made mistakes and make things get, much more worse. Making things getting worse is not what you want to do, leading to the possibility of consequences for the company and yourself. While the risk is kind of low on this, it's still a risk. You could really get yourself into trouble here because it could create more breaches to the account. There could be problems with the customer doing things on the phone. And yes, I've actually seen it in my center where we had an investigation of a person because somebody actually did do harm to themselves. In fact, my understanding was that there was suicide after a phone call, and the family wanted to put it towards the campaign and the company that we were and are working on behalf of. That can lead to all kinds of nasty things happening with lawsuits and whatnot. So we want to avoid that. Treat these calls as nuisance calls. That is precisely what they are. But make sure you have come to that conclusion before taking the next step, disconnecting the customer, as some legitimate issues may need to be addressed. If the customer has a severe mental health issue, point or transfer them to the best resource to help them and get off the call. It is a tinfoiler's mantra to basically just go on and on and on. So if it is a tinfoil hatter type, address what you can and move them along or disconnect the call. So the bottom line is that your job is to provide customer service, tech support, or sales support. Handling nuisance calls is part of the job to a certain point, but handling calls with those who are tinfoil hatters or facing severe mental health issues should be quick. When the goal here is to be quick, you want to get them through, find out if there's a real legitimate issue, finish up with that issue. If it's something else, If it's a tinfoiler who's basically going on with all kinds of conspiracy theories like Black Hawk helicopters flying overhead, or Donald Trump's in their phone, or the Kardashians are watching them, then basically you want to get that out of your queue as quickly as you can, within a 5 to 10 minute period if you can. And if it means being a little more rough on them, do it. Seriously, do it. But now, politely, but be a little more rough here and say, hey, do you have an issue here that we can work on? And if they come back to that, okay, I can clearly understand your issue here with the Blackhawks and Kardashians listening to you, but that is something that I would recommend you reach out to other resources for. Thank you very much for reaching out to us, and shut it. End it right there and then. Because the bottom line, you'll be on a call for an hour or two with this, and you really got other customers you need to deal with. So that's my takeaway. And for managers listening to this podcast, you need to basically help your staff deal with these people, because these are nuisance calls. They are a bother. I, for one, I'm weary of them. I've been dealing with them for a long, long period of time. And I wanted to do this podcast with the idea of being sensitive, though, to the fact that there are people who are mentally ill and have some serious cognitive issues and so on. We get them on our phone. We still want to help them. We still want to be kind and respectful and do everything we can. But there are people out there that are that kind of ill, that are just basically touting crazy scenarios that are not real. And they may have some mental health issues, but they may not. They just believe things that are not true. And we want to scale that down. So basically, remembering that you're not a trained person to deal with this. So refer them to the right resource, get them to the place they need help and resources to get that help, and then just go forward with your day. Get them off the call and move on forward. It's hard to balance that, but you're going to have to learn to do this, because the bottom line is, if you don't, you're going to be basically rooked into this, as I mentioned, for a good period of time and chunk of your day, and that's not what you're there for. You're there to service the customer in the technical support, sales, or customer support role, not the mental health role. So with that, I'm going to end this particular podcast edition. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'm Cliff. We'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to Tales from the Cube. You can hear us on all the major podcast platforms such as Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. We'll see you in the next episode.
That was strangely arousing.